Apparently, the Prime Minister doesn't see the problem with his statements, drawing new attention and contentious, divisive thoughts and statements towards it, which is the entire problem with it in the first place. The Prime Minister has come out to defend his statements that the vigils were one of the major contributing factors to our current state of our COVID spike in Trinidad and Tobago. Firstly, he wants it known that the statements were misrepresented, and he didn't mean necessarily an attack on the people that are going through the pain right now. And he brought out evidence to prove what he said. He's a scientist. He says he has evidence to prove what he says. But of course, there's evidence to debate that. And that's the entire point. This entire thing is drawing the debate into whether vigils that occurred 2 months ago have any serious impact on our current life. And okay, there may have been chain reaction impact, but impact in terms of by us studying this, by us going back and revisiting this, are we getting any furtherance? Are we getting any progress in our country? Because all of this is going on while CXC is making a big announcement that has a massive impact on the students in our country, the thousands of students that have to sit this exam, that they believe and they are convinced of, and our system convinces them has a significant role and impact on their future. So we're talking about the past and vigils while students are worried about their future and CXC. Before we get into all of that, if you aren't subscribed, click the subscribe button down there and subscribe to the page, click the notification bell so you'll be updated when new videos are released. At the moment, I'm doing one video daily and we're talking regional and local topics and news and events that occur and impact our life, will impact my life. And I suppose what impacts my life as a young Caribbean person would also impact your life. Like, comment, share the video. If you think it's good content and you want to see it spread out there and you want to see more people discussing these topics instead of whatever you think may be more frivolous topics, well, share the video and let's grow the audience. So, Rowley, comments on vigils being misrepresented. The Prime Minister on Wednesday said his recent remarks in Parliament chiding the UNC for allegedly promoting vigils were being misrepresented as an attack on the anti-crime cause, when in fact he had simply said gatherings were not a good idea, yet the UNC was organizing them. Dr. Rowley sent a statement via WhatsApp to Newsday to reply to allegations by the UNC and the Candlelight Movement on Tuesday, criticizing comments he made on Monday in the House of Representatives. The Candlelight Movement would have been the organization that was more directly in charge of the vigils and the prayer walks, etc. They were a movement that if we're being honest, a lot of the movement was political. The movement had within it a lot of people who were former, current, and maybe future political players, political activists, and people within our Trinidad political landscape. They were known. So that's who the Candlelight Movement was. But they said that they had nothing to do with UNC, which is the opposition party. And the opposition party, UNC, did not fund their movement. Rowley's response now, he's saying, my response in Parliament about the direct involvement of the UNC is a statement of fact about documented UNC political activity, and in no way is any commentary on the trauma which spawned the political activity. I have every confidence that the average unbiased citizen will be able to understand this as they look at the scientific data and reports and will not be swayed by self-serving interpretations that appear to want to fly into the face of the scientific data to conclude that these large and frequent public events could not have contributed in any way to our current circumstances. Well, from his response here, it seems like the Prime Minister still doesn't get it. He assumes that he would be able to speak about the Candlelight Vigil in a negative light, trying to attack the UNC's political part that they played in it, or at least his perception of the UNC's political part that they played in it, while saying that he isn't attacking this and he is leaving that part off. The fact is, as is obvious by now, that you cannot do one without doing the other. And if you think that this attack on the UNC is so necessary for the good of for the good and furtherance of our country, then well, you have to take that amount of licks with it. But then if you're looking at this like I am and seeing that, well, the perception of an attack by our Prime Minister on a movement that was geared towards decreasing violence does not look good. And it doesn't matter whether he does in fact have the scientific part on his side, which he says he does have now. The the nature of the statement would always be taken badly. He says he has the confidence in the average unbiased citizen. And right there lies the problem. What is the average unbiased citizen? Can someone show me who this person is? What does this character look like? Because in our case in Trinidad, where our politics is so heavily divided, well, I guess in most cases, politics seems so heavily divided. Who is this unbiased person? Most people have their own biases. So evidently, these average unbiased citizens that he was sure would take his statement as just being on a fact level, they aren't plentiful out there. How people seem to be taking the statement according to what I see is according to their political allegiances. If you have some allegiances with the ruling government, with the ruling party, you see the statements as not being that bad, and you understand where Rowley is coming from. While if you have allegiance with not the ruling party, then you see the statements as being horrendous and flying in the face of the traumatized people. But our Prime Minister remained confident that if he actually just provide the information, the scientific data, him being a scientist and all, if he provided this scientific data to the population and he proved this point that he was trying to show, that it would change everyone's mind, and who was very angry with him would no longer be angry because they would understand that he was actually speaking the truth and he was just being scientific, and that when he said this, he had no real intention of just scoring political points. This wasn't about political points to our esteemed Prime Minister. This was just about him being scientifically precise. I don't make the data, Rowley said in response to questions yesterday. Go and look at the charts and graphs and see when the significant increase started, not where it passed, not where it reached, he said. And he provided a graph for us to look at. And I have another graph that I sourced, and we can look at both and compare them a bit. First, we're looking at the Prime Minister's graph. And in his graph, the period of vigil and demonstration activity is laid out from the 4th of the second month going straight into the 1st of the 4th month. And then if we look now at the other graph that was posted and shown to attempt to show that the vigils could not have been the cause of these spikes, that graph has the vigil period as being somewhere around the 5th and ending somewhere around the 12th of February. And there's where the conflict is. Where and when did the vigils end? If we're being honest and trying not to rewrite history, this is having nothing to do with excusing the Prime Minister's statement and saying whether it was a good statement or not. I already stated my opinion on that. But if we're trying not to rewrite history, the vigils didn't end on the 12th of February. Well within to March, we saw vigils occurring. There were headlines there's a headline in the Sunday Newsday, even on the 7th of March that read, hundreds launch safety for women petition at Port of Spain vigil. That was on the 7th of March. That was well into March. That was well after February the 12th. So the vigils did occur into March. And the truth is, I don't understand why this point is hanging so many people up. Either way, either side, I don't understand why we are arguing this. On the Prime Minister and government side, I don't understand the benefit that he thinks would be gained by proving this point and attempting to hammer this home. And I think either way, from what we are seeing, from what is being said the world over, if it was someone to attempt to make that point, wouldn't it have been the health officials? Wouldn't it have been the CMO trying to make a health point to try and draw a health point into the discussion, not a politician trying to make this point and display graphs to us? And even on the opposition side, or on people who went to the vigil side, why are you arguing over this? Are you trying to say that having the vigils and having crowds gathered during a pandemic was a good idea? Because at least in hindsight, we're supposed to be able to look back and see this may not have been the best idea at the best time in the best place. I understand how it could have happened, and no one chose when this young lady was going to be brutally murdered. And the vigils, the actions, the public protests that happened because of that happened because of that, and it was in reaction to that. So okay, that's understandable. And at that point in time, COVID wasn't as scary and significant a threat to our country. Many people were warning against the vigils, but the warnings weren't as significant and scary as they would have been in this present time. But now, when we look back, I think it's clear to see that those would not have been good ideas. They weren't good ideas. That's fine to say now. It seemed like a good idea in the moment, but you don't have to hold on to the idea now. There's nothing holding you to that idea. It's in the past. And while we are here spending energy trying to figure out who is to blame in the past and who has fault to take in the past, currently students are facing the challenges of their future. They're facing CXC. They're facing an exam that they are going to have to write with minimum preparation. Less preparation than possibly any other year of students ever had since the duration of CXC. So significant is the challenge that these students are facing or would be facing that UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, they had a recommendation for CXC and they wrote to CXC to try to get CXC to give an ease up on these children. In India, a video that I did last week, we spoke about how in India, they cancelled their exams. In England, they cancelled their exam. In Ireland, they cancelled their exams. And UNICEF in the Caribbean asked the CXC, the Caribbean Examination Council, to hold up on their exams too. Full stop. UNICEF tells CXC, don't set CSEC cape and urges ministers' intervention. This article was since May the 24th. United Nations Children's Agency, UNICEF, on Monday urged the Caribbean Examination Council not to proceed with this year's Caribbean Secondary Education Certificate and Caribbean Advanced Proficiency examinations in their current form and has called on education ministers to intervene urgently. They give a strong statement and they declared these are unprecedented times and will collectively require us to adapt and recreate normalcy and routine for the many lives disrupted. A movement like this calls for innovative approaches to stem the effects of COVID-19 on generations to come. Citing strong grounds for a different approach, they pointed to the COVID-19 pandemic, which they argue has further exacerbated the gaps in preparedness amongst the most disadvantaged students. And this is the argument many people are continuously having. The current state in the pandemic and how schooling is being carried out is creating gaps for students who would have already been disadvantaged to now be even more disadvantaged. And that's not something that we would want. That's not a benefit for the Caribbean region. UNICEF continued, our main concern is the low level of preparedness academically and psychologically of many of the thousands of 16 to 18-year-old students across the region to sit the exams. In this context, requiring students to sit an examination that includes components that cover an entire 2-year course of study would risk being ineffective. And this was UNICEF's letter to CXC. And what was CXC's response? CXC's response was, forget about them kids. Because they continued with the exam. They basically took not one recommendation that was given to them. They delayed the exam by 2 weeks. The minimum recommendation that was being given was 3 weeks postponement, but no, the exam was delayed by 2 weeks. Let's read the release. The Caribbean Examination Council, CXC, is delaying the regional exams by 2 weeks. The secondary exit exams are now set to begin on June 28th. The initial start time for the exam was June 16th. And this is how it goes. All papers will be administered at CSEC and CAPE in their original format. Papers 1, Paper 2, and the school-based assessment. Delay of the start of the examinations. We said that already. Results of the examinations will be available in the last week of September. The deadline to defer the sitting of examinations has been extended also to May 31st. The deadline for the submission of all school-based assessments has been extended to 30th of June. The review of broad topics shared by CXC for Paper 2 a review of the broad topics shared by CXC for Paper 2 examinations. The results of this will be the results of this review will be shared by Friday, 28th May. Though CXC has already issued concessions to candidates, during the marking grading process, consideration will be given to the psychosocial impact students may have experienced. Somebody explain to me what that last line says. Though we have made concessions to you to make this exam more suitable, when remarking, if we find that too many people are failing, we're going to ease up on the marking. That's what that last bit seems like to me. I haven't seen a student yet that seems to be happy about this because the delay for 2 weeks, what is that for? What is the delay for 2 weeks for? I am confused. What is this delay supposed to do? After these 2 weeks, is the coronavirus going to disappear? Is the 2 weeks to give coronavirus a chance to dissipate? Because I don't think 2 weeks is going to do that job. And one of the many recommendations was to decrease the workload and to decrease the syllabus and to decrease the number of topics being marked on. They said they did that with paper 2 and they are going to further review it. But bear in mind, paper 1 still has all of the topics. So what are you going to do now when you have a decreased amount of work to study for paper 2, but they're saying for paper 1, you have all the topics. So am I going to now sacrifice parts of my paper 1 to say, okay, I'm just going to study for the paper 2, or would I now have to still study everything just like I had to before? That doesn't make any kind of sense. And while CXC is proverbially spitting in some students' face like this, we have our government, our officials arguing about, in past tense, if a vigil held for someone who was brutally murdered, arguing over that, over a true tragedy like that, trying to link it now to a present tragedy. So our politicians are arguing over a past tragedy, trying to link it with a present tragedy, and negating that we are seeing that is going to happen to a future tragedy. Because make no doubt, the present state that CXC is in, if it continues as it's going to be a tragedy. It's going to be a train wreck for lots of students within this Caribbean region. CXC as an organization is supposed to be run by CARICOM. If you look at who is the owner of CXC, if you do a search on that, it is said CARICOM is supposed to be the owner of CXC. CARICOM is the Caribbean community. That's the islands within the Caribbean that we have come together and made this agreement, so we are supposed to have the control over CARICOM. So why is it that CXC, who is supposed to be under the control of CARICOM, seems like they are just a governing body unto themselves? And it seems like the Caribbean islands have no say on what actually happens within CXC. We have to go begging cap in hand, CXC, please do not abuse our students, please do not abuse our children in our islands. After what they already did last year, and many students, lest some of you forget, many students are still waiting on their certificates from last year. Many students are still upset over whatever happened last year because there hasn't been a clear explanation as to how these grades came about. The explanation that was given was that some teachers marked too softly on the SBAs. So when the SBAs were carried up, some of these grades were brought down. But even if that's the case, that still cannot possibly explain all the weird gerrymandering and gymnastics that went on with the grades last year. And now, for us to continue blindly going with this organization that is as opaque as a concrete wall. You cannot see through CXC. We do not know how this process goes. CXC says they did recommendations with students. Who were these students? Can we please get a link to these students so we can find out from these students what the questions CXC asked you were? What could you possibly have told CXC that had them believing that this was the right move to make? Yes, delay it by 2 weeks and make no further changes, because that's going to help so grandly. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.
When you wake up in the morning and you hear the birds cry,